He's the one who discovered what genes get turned on by dairy. And the weight gain gene gets turned on. Prostate cancer, breast cancer gene gets turned on. The acne gene. So, I mean, like, are you kidding? Dairy is higher on my list than sugar.
And what about butter then?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I can't do better because
Before we get to this episode with Dr. Joan Ifland, I wanted to let you know the July Carnivore Challenge is now open. You see, what you'll learn from this discussion with Dr. Ifland is that no matter what lifestyle you're on, community is so important. Especially when you go out, you're going to see lots of people eating sugars and carbohydrates and telling you that meat is bad and meat is going to cause heart disease and cancer. And that's why in our community, I bring on 4 carnivore doctors every single month, and they're going to help answer your medical questions to help you understand that meat is safe and also to help your family to understand that this lifestyle is completely normal. We also have carnivores living and breathing this lifestyle with over 10 years of experience, losing over 200 pounds. So if you want to join the July challenge, you can head to academy.5minutebody.com, and there's also a clickable link in the description of this video. And if you got any value from my interview with Dr. Joan Ifland, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Dr. Ifland, welcome.
thank you so much. And I'm just so glad to be here.
Well, food addiction might be one of the biggest reasons why people can't lose weight. And I know many of my viewers, they follow a carnivore diet, but there are some carnivore approved foods that are still processed and that will still keep you addicted. So today, Dr. Ifland is going to talk about the worst foods that you can eat that are going to stop your weight loss results. But first, Dr. Ifland, I would love to know, how did you get interested in food addiction?
I was raised in a traumatizing household. My parents were emotionally unstable. Fast forward, I had my own kids. I was determined I was not going to traumatize them. And there I'd be raging, which is traumatizing. And I didn't want to be. I would watch myself raging. It was so terrible. I did a lot of things. I did years and years of personal therapy. I did a woman's healing group. I spent time and money training with them. I did 12-step groups. Nothing helped the raging. And I was also yo-yo dieting at the same time. I could do 1,200 calories for so many months, and the weight would come off, and then I'd put it right back on. So there I was in a 12-step group for miserable personalities, and somebody heard the sugar forcing the rage. The sugar was driving the raging. And she came up to me and said, you should join Food Addicts in Recovery. But I didn't understand why. But at the end of the year, I'd regained the weight. So I went and got the book. I didn't read the book, just turned to the food plan. I thought this will never work. Way too much food. I'm not irritable. I'm not hungry. I'm sure I'm not going to lose any weight. But it eliminated sugars and flours. And the miracles just started rolling in. Within 4 days, no cravings, bloating gone, fatigue gone, brain fog gone. The next week, no, the allergies got better, and a lifelong sinus infection cleared up. But it was the third week when I realized for 3 weeks I hadn't been yelling at my family. And I just committed my life at that moment. It was quite a moment of epiphany to helping other people understand what processed foods do to them mentally, emotionally, physically, behaviorally, because processed foods cripple cell function. And when your cells aren't working, that's how you get disease. And I have just spent the last 27 years reading the research. So one thing I would say is, if you wonder if there's any research on this, I spent 3 years full time writing the textbook for the field. There are 2,000 studies in the textbook. It's a deep addiction. Those cravings are deep, deep, deep. They're coming from lots and lots of hyperstimulated cells, and they're not normal. It is not normal to have cravings. And people are severely traumatized by the disease itself, by not having cells that have worked, and by living in a culture where it's your reality is denied. No, no, you don't have that. You have a weight loss problem. No, 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 you don't have cravings. That's not the issue. You have childhood issues. No, 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 you're just lazy. Now I know. Now I know it needs a surround community. It needs immersion in a kind, compassionate community full of like-minded people. And
I know that many of my viewers, you guys are carnivore or trying to be carnivore. The thing is, I think a lot of us understand the sugar addiction. Some of us don't really understand processed food addiction because Dr. Iflan and I were speaking prior to the start of this meeting that there are certain carnivore foods or keto foods that are highly processed that are going to keep you addicted. So can you explain what is a processed food?
so a processed food, it no longer looks like the plant or animal that it came from. The big exception to this is dairy, because you think, well, at the moment of harvest, that's when it came out of the cow. No, no, no. That cow is a food processor. It's the grass and the hay going into the cow. Even dairy is a processed food, but it's been processed by a cow. It's very important, though, to understand the components of dairy and what it might be doing to you. Now, we do have some interesting new research on fat addiction. This is very, very solid research done at the University of Boston. We know that fat can be addictive. So there are very specific issues that carnivores would benefit from knowing about. And I'm so glad that we're going to go over those today.
Okay, well, let's get into those foods. I'm going to call it the 10 worst carnivore foods that you guys need to avoid. But if Dr. Ifland has more, bring them on. What do you think is the first one that people really need to stop eating if their goal is weight loss and overall health?
Any of the processed keto treats. So what is happening in the brain in cravings, so let's just call it intense cravings, is that you have these reward centers, dopamine, serotonin, cannabinoid, and opioid, that are designed to bring you pleasure. They're designed to make your life good and satisfying. And that's what makes life enjoyable. Those reward centers are carrying messages of good, pleasure, satisfaction. Now, when they become hyperstimulated, because the food industry knows how to hyperstimulate those reward centers, where did they get that? They got it from the tobacco industry. This all started, all the obesity epidemic starts when in the mid 1980s, the big tobacco buys Kraft, Nabisco, and General Foods in the US. But these are global companies. They use the cravings, I'll call it cravings or addiction business model, to hyperstimulate those reward centers. Because when they're hyperstimulated and they're pumping out those pleasurable neurotransmitters, that gets control of your behavior. It's no longer here in the frontal lobe where it's rational. Oh, I take good care of myself. Oh, I don't eat things that are bad for me. That's all happening in the frontal lobe. But when you get those intense cravings, they go straight over to the behavior center and control it. You're not in control anymore. It's that great Tina Turner line, in the song Addicted to Love, your mind is not your own. Well, that's what having intense cravings is. So once you know that, then you know what you're looking for. You're looking for any substance or a related trigger, any substance or a related trigger that's going to hyperactivate the reward centers and get control of your behavior. You're not lazy. You don't lack willpower. You have intense cravings that are there deliberately. So when you start there, then you can just back up a little bit and you can say, okay, well, what are the substances that do that? So now they're doing the same thing with keto products.
And carnivore products.
Yes, yes. If it has a label, it's a warning label. If it's in a package, it's not food. It's going to act on your brain like a drug.
There's also one thing I wanted to ask because even if you make foods at home, so I'm thinking of carnivore ice cream, keto ice cream. I'm thinking of brown butter bites, which is regular butter that you caramelize and turn into a little fat bomb. These are all processed carnivore custard. These are all processed foods. Is it correct?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I hope this is, it's kind of a shocking analogy, but I hope it sticks with your audience. You can make meth at home, and it probably is safer than the meth that you buy on the street. But where is this going? It's not helping to think in those terms. And all these categories of ultra processed foods versus processed foods, it's just like crack cocaine versus cocaine. It's just, yes, it's not quite as concentrated, but you're not going to, what we're after here is liberating those reward centers. The cravings are like your reward centers are enslaved by the food industry. Your reward centers exist to create profit for the food industry because they're so reactive. They react so strongly to any kind of a signal related to those foods. So seeing somebody else eat them, seeing them in a grocery store, driving past a fast food place. Now, in the US, it's incredibly intense. In other countries, it's not quite so intense. But our avenues are lined with fast food and the huge billboards, constant. And of course, screens are designed to create cravings and stress and cravings work in concert. Stress activates cravings, cravings activate stress. So what I really hope your audience gets is that no matter how many programs you've tried, you have never failed. The program failed. The program did not recognize the severe cravings, and the program was not comprehensive enough, in-depth enough, immersive enough to stop that kind of an intense craving. So try again. Try again. We're going to talk, I hope we'll talk at the end about some answers. Those food industries, they hire neurologists. They hire the PhD brain scientists to maximize the amount of cravings, not just from the product, but here is the key. Cravings start with a trigger. They don't start when you're eating the product. The eating of the product will intensify it. It starts with the seeking, the looking for, the going to get, the searching. And that is what those neurologists are doing. They want to trigger you. Okay, so if you buy or you make a keto ice cream, you might as well be triggered by the original product because it's called an associative cue. It's triggering the same flood of cravings because it associates that the view, the picture of it, the sight of it, the smell of it, the taste of it, the feel of it, it's cold in your hand. It associates that with the original product, and you're just flooding your brain with cravings, no matter what's actually in that. So there's a technical name for these kinds of products, and they're facsimile products. They look like, they resemble, they create a copy of, and your brain doesn't know the difference. Using products that you're told are safer, but they still look like, act like, trigger the same response as the original product, it's going to keep you in the cravings. Cravings, think of it this way, cravings are a red flag that the addiction has been activated. When that happens, you need a safe place to run because eventually those neurotransmitters will get a hold of your behavior. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I call it the zombie walk. You're like walking, your frontal lobe is screaming, no, we don't want to eat that. But the reward centers have gotten control of the behavior centers, and you're screaming, I don't want to eat that while you're walking like a zombie.
I love that you said that because I've experienced that so much. Your brain knows I shouldn't have it, but your behavior is, no, I'm going to have it. And you're physically walking there to get it. Your brains keep on telling you, you know what's going to happen. I know this is not good for you, but you keep doing it. And it's so interesting for me. It's the dairy. I know I shouldn't be having it. And I love what you said, that dairy is a processed food.
Dairy, I would say, dairy is at the top of the list for a carnivore because it's promoted as a health food. It's promoted. The Dairy Council is like the Tobacco Institute. They have a harmful product. Yes, it's made by an animal. It's not a plant. Dairy is a product very specifically designed to put 500 pounds on a calf in 1 year. So you have a 100-pound calf, and that's milk right out of the organic mom. It's raw milk. Nothing's been done to it except by what the cow did to it. She's got 4 stomachs to turn that grass into an addictive substance. And she wants that to get her calf a little bit high, because then the calf will be attracted to coming back and getting more. So all breast milk from every mammal has casomorphins in it. Casomorphins, dairy morphine. It attaches, we know that there are 4 different kinds in dairy, and one of them, beta casomorphine, actually attaches in the brain to the same places as opium. So just think of it this way. There's enough casomorphine in raw milk to put a 100-pound animal to sleep.
Hang on. Raw milk? Do you know how much people love raw milk because so many nutrients, all these things that we're told? Are you saying that raw milk is a processed food and we should not be consuming it, Dr. Ifland?
Okay, so I never tell people what to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I give them the evidence, and I think the evidence gives them the ability then to evaluate for themselves. Like, you eat dairy, you consume dairy, and then you're sleepy. Now it's clear. Oh, I see. My opioid receptors are being stimulated, and now I'm sleepy and I'm numb. And I heard Dr. Ifland talking about the casomorphins in dairy. Now I get it. Now you're developing a natural aversion. So now you're thinking, should I have that yogurt for breakfast? I have a big meeting this morning and I want to be perfectly sharp. No, I think I'll pass. So now you're educated. Now you're equipped. Now you're informed. Our organization does a lot of training. We train professionals. We train people who want to help the next person. We train people who want to help themselves. Now you're trained. Oh, it was the dairy. But until you have that, nobody's ever told you that dairy can make you sleepy, numb, and gain weight. I mean, just think, this is incredible research done in Germany. The researcher's name is Bodo Melnick. He's like the Brad Pitt of my life. So,
I have to look him up then. Brad Pitt of your life. Wow.
Yeah. He's the one who discovered what genes get turned on by dairy. And the weight gain gene gets turned on. The prostate cancer gene gets turned on. The breast cancer gene gets turned on. The acne gene gets turned on. So, I mean, like, are you kidding? I'm not going to say that I eat perfectly. I'm just not. Like, last night I went out for dinner. Okay, there was a sauce on the plate and I didn't, I avoided it, but I ate some of it. But there is one thing I absolutely will not eat because I like having use of my brain. It's dairy. Dairy is higher on my list than sugar.
So you mentioned raw milk. Let's just say raw milk and milk. Yogurt. What about cheese?
Cheese is to dairy like hash is to poppies.
Really bad.
It's concentrated. Yeah, it's like poppies are okay. You could eat a poppy, I presume nothing would happen. It's when you extract and concentrate the opiate that you get a drug. What is cheese? It's concentrated milk.
And what about butter then?
Well, that's an interesting thing. I can't do butter because of the association with cheese. The addictive substance is in the protein, and butter is 100% fat. I still can't do it. I mean, I know there's some frozen butter in my freezer, but it's like once I start, I can't stop. So then I know maybe it's not the substance itself, but the association. But now we can start to talk about fat in general. So we talked about dairy. Let's talk about fat in general. All kinds of fats, and some are worse than others. Clearly, trans fats will kill you, so nobody uses trans fats anymore. This research coming out of University of Boston was pretty conclusive, in my opinion. They took two groups. It took three groups of rats. One group got the regular chow. The next group got sugar as much as they wanted, and then the third group got fat as much as they wanted. Well, when you're doing research on cravings, an addiction, what you're watching for are very particular things. And one of them is called progression or tolerance. It's when the animal is eating more and more and more of the substance over time. So they knew the rats would develop sugar addiction. I mean, sugar is more addictive than cocaine, come on. So they collected data in parallel from these two groups. Well, the rats eating fat also developed progression. So you can't ask a rat how are your cravings, but you can watch what's going on in the brain. And so they saw the hyperactivity of the reward centers and the behavior centers. But mostly what they watched was the increase in consumption of calories, not quantities. So the sugar addiction was what looked more aggressive in terms of the volume, the weight of the food eaten. But if you consider that fat has many more calories, the rats that were eating more and more of the fat actually had a steeper, they developed worse addiction faster. So let's talk about addiction to fats. This is a little bit complicated, but it's not that complicated. And I think that your audience is going to resonate with it. So you're just about to hear something that you might identify with. And before I start this description, I just want to say again, this is not your fault. So you have these undiagnosed intense cravings. Cravings require very specific treatment. It's an addiction. You didn't ask for it. But cravings are how you know you have it. It's one of the 11 signs of an addiction. Okay, great. So you're going to try carnivore or keto or any food plan that reduces or eliminates refined carbohydrates, sugars, and any kind of flour. We didn't get to start to talk about flour, but it's one of the major categories of addictive substances. So terrific, good. You cut back on all your sugar, you eliminate all the flour, and you start to feel great. You're substituting fats, and the cravings stop. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what people love. They love the cravings stop. Your mind becomes your own again. It's exhilarating. It's thrilling. It's fantastic. The weeks go by. For some people, it's only going to be days, and for other people, it might be months. And you're just happy as anything because you don't have those cravings. And then you start thinking about, pepperoni sticks. And I know in Turkey, you're not thinking about pork rinds, but you're thinking about, if you're in the US or some other country, you might be starting to think about pork rinds. You might be starting to think about cheese. You might be starting to think about heavy whipped cream. You might be starting to think about sour cream. You might be starting to think about ice cream. And you gradually notice that you're eating more and more. You've developed cravings for fat. So fats activate a different system in the brain. We talked about how cheese activates the opioid pathways. Fat is acting on the same pathways that marijuana affects, the cannabinoid. The cannabinoid pathways are named after cannabis. And you can see them light up, and you can see the stomach create lots of receptors for them. on a high-fat diet. Okay. Now you're out of the frying pan and into the fire. You have untreated carbohydrate addiction. And so it transfers. That's the key word for carnivores and for keto. Has the untreated cravings for sugar simply transferred? Now do you have cravings for fats? Okay, but here's the bad news. Not that that's not bad enough, but it kind of comes in phases. Phase one is I cut back on the sugar. What happens is you go into sugar withdrawal, the keto flu. It tells you that there is a drug action going on here, because that's withdrawal. That keto flu, that's not keto flu. That's refined carbohydrate withdrawal. So that's phase one. Phase two is you develop the cravings for fat. And then phase three is the sugar cravings incubate. They do not go away. They're there under the surface, getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And then you have so they re-erupt, they re-emerge, and now you have sugar and fat combined. And when you're using more than one substance, the cravings are not just twice as bad, they're exponentially worse. And now you have sugar fat cravings. Now you have sugar fat addiction. Now, sugar fat cravings, when you're eating them in combination, they really cripple cell function. And so now you're very vulnerable to developing diet-related diseases, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, etc.
You mentioned the addiction. So, okay, we have cured our addiction to sugar, most of us. Then you move on to the addiction of fat. Then what do you think of a high-fat carnivore diet? Have you seen people in your group that are carnivore, but they're adding in the butter, they're adding in the animal fats? Do you see that as an addiction?
Totally. It's a different system.
Oh no.
It's the cannabinoid.
Yeah.
It's not so sugar really affects dopamine a lot. Flour affects serotonin. Fats affect the cannabinoid. And then you have three sources of opioid stimulation. One is gluten. Gluteomorphine is in gluten. Salt activates so excessive salt activates the opioid pathways, and then dairy. This is a monster. This addiction is a monster because it starts in childhood. It really starts in utero. That very first smell cell is going out to sample the amniotic fluid to find out what to get ready to eat when it's born, the baby's born. And so if there's sugar, if there's processed foods consumed by the mother, then that amniotic fluid is teaching the child, the baby, the little tiny fetus, prefer this, look for this when you get out, because that's what's out there. So it's a deeply, deeply, deeply seated addiction. It's deeply embedded. Every cell in my brain developed in an addicted brain. But the worst part about it is if I lived among people who didn't eat it, I wouldn't eat it. But everybody out there in the US, 73% of what people are eating is processed foods. 93% of people have high triglycerides, cholesterol, glucose, blood pressure, or waist to hip ratio. So everybody around me is eating processed foods, which is engaging and harnessing the most powerful part of the brain, and that is the urge to fit in, the urge to be normal, the urge to be accepted. And that is deadly. In a culture like the US, Turkey is not so bad. Australia is just as bad. The Arabian Peninsula is just as bad because of the tobacco industries had those relationships around the world. They could distribute and advertise these products, which are part of the addiction business model, and they did it fast. And countries around the world became obese in 20 years. So the problem is the reason why people cannot stick to a food plan is because they are abnormal. Eating that food plan and going to social events and not eating the food there is abnormal. And the brain will fight you on that tooth and nail. So it will drag you back to eating the bad foods and eating the and being sick if you don't surround yourself with people who are eating clean. And that sounds impossible, but that is what we are offering online now. And we're the only outfit in the world that recognizes the true core root cause of lapsing and going back to foods that you don't want to eat. It is that urge to fit in. It is the urge to avoid being abnormal. Your brain will, like we see it all the time. People come into our community. We broadcast around the clock, 15 hours a day, so that you can almost always open your screen and feel normal. Oh, yeah. These people do this. I do this too. Yeah, because it's dairy and it's sugar and it's flour and it's gluten and it's excessive salt and it's excessive fat. Small quantities of fat, reasonable. Like this is all I'm having today. That's okay. That's it. You got to eat fats.
So I would recommend the fat that is in the unprocessed meat. So think of things like a steak, a salmon, a pork, chicken with the natural skin on it. That is your fat that's already in it. But then, see, I went down the trap of, let me just add some butter. Oh, some extra butter. I love what you said that when you have butter, it tastes like cheese. Yes, it does to me. And I can just eat it and eat it. So just sticking with the whole unprocessed foods.
I have two people I work with very closely who went through this process and tried carnivore, and they were binging on those fatty meats. Now, there's no evidence for animal protein. There's evidence for fat. There, all all the sugars and the artificial sweeteners, flour, gluten, excessive salt, excessive fat, dairy, caffeine, food additives. We have evidence for all that. You will not find one study and the only reason why there's evidence for plant proteins is because they're embedded in a carbohydrate. So if you have carbohydrate sensitivity, then even a plant protein could be problematic. And it goes both ways. Here's the thing. We have people who are binging as carnivores. They're binging on animal fat. They go over to a plant-based program, they're fine. I know I work very closely with two people for whom that happened after years of agony. It goes the other way too. We have people who are binging on carbohydrates and they go over to a carnivore and oh, thank goodness those cravings stopped. So it depends on, out of that long list of, these are 7 major categories of craving substances. For some people, if you were fed sugar as a child, but you were not overfed on fats, then as an adult, getting off the sugar and going over to now, but this is what we've got to really, really focus on, is avoiding addiction transfer. You get off the sugar and then, but your brain, this is what I have discovered over these years. This is what I discovered from writing the textbook, is that a brain that is suffering, this hurts, a brain that is hurting from cravings, you take it off of one substance, it'll find another. If you train the brain to stay calm and you stop the brain from craving, which you can do, you control the triggers and you eliminate the addictive substances and the substances that you have to use. Like I have to eat fat. Even the people who are highly sensitive to fat, they will grind up flaxseed and use that as a fat, and it just doesn't trigger the fat cravings. Treat the cravings. It's a separate program. you learn how to stay calm in all situations so that the stress doesn't activate the cravings. You learn how to neutralize cravings by just through affirmations, for example. That makes me sick. And that's the path to pain. You do that again and again. So you neutral, if you get exposed to one of those triggers, your brain will go over to, oh, yeah, that's pain, instead of going over here to, oh, that's yummy. So it takes time, it takes repetition, and most importantly, it takes being around people who are not going to trigger you and people who make you feel normal as you're going through this extraordinary process. So don't blame yourself.
I love that you said that. I think the more support and community that we have to know that we are not the ones that are ill or sick, there's nothing wrong with us. Where can people find your group, Dr. Ifland?
Oh, thank you. Go to foodaddictionreset.com. Take the self quiz. So there are 11 signs of addiction, and I can run through them real quick if you want, if we have time.
Sure, absolutely.
So I'll run through them real quick. One is unintended use. You have a plan and you don't follow the plan. The cravings, your plan's in the frontal lobe, the cravings back here. This is like a battle between the reward system and the frontal lobe. It's a battle, and you can hear the battle taking place. No, I don't want to eat that. Oh, come on. It's just two parts
Sounds
of your
like
brain
me.
talking to each other.
Yes, maybe I'm an addict. Yes, go.
Okay, so unintended use is I have a plan not to eat that, and then I eat it. Number two, failure to cut back. And that is when almost 100% of people regain weight that they lose. Number three is time spent, not just going and getting the stuff and making it and eating it and sleeping it off, but also the thoughts. Number four is cravings. Number five is failure to fulfill roles. Like, I know I should go to my volunteer group, but I'm going to go home and eat. Or I'm so fat now, I don't want anybody to see me. Or I'm too big to get down on the floor with my kids. Or I'm too depressed and sleepy to apply for a promotion. Failure to fulfill roles. And the next one is relationship problems. I'd rather wait for my whole family to go to bed so I can eat what I hid in the laundry room, or they want me to stop eating this, I can't stop eating it. Relationship problems. Or you're so craving, you're thinking about it, the cravings have hold of your brain, you can't focus on another person and think what to do for them. Your mind is not your own, and that includes doing things for other people, connecting to other people. Coming out of isolation is a big part of recovery. It's something else I like about our community is that you can turn it on and off, and you don't have to make any effort to go there. Okay, so the next one is activities given up. It's I used to be able to go outside. Now I don't want to go outside anymore. I used to go to my faith organization, and now I would rather stay home. I'm too tired to go, and nobody wants to see me anyway. So depression. And now you get, and the next one is interesting, hazardous use. So you think, oh, hazardous use, that's drunk driving. No, but it's driving also inebriated from processed foods or eating while driving. You know, you're driving with your elbow because your hands are yes. Then you get into the serious things where you know your body has been altered. It is use in spite of knowledge of consequences. So in the US, 93% of people have a diet-related condition, and they're still eating 73% of their food in processed foods. So it's that thought, I know I shouldn't. If you've ever had the I know I shouldn't thought, that's a sign of intense cravings with an underlying addiction. Then you have tolerance, so progressive use. You know, you start out with making the keto ice cream every now and then it becomes a daily affair gradually. You're eating more of something. You're having those pepperoni sticks 4 times a day, or you're opening a bag of pork rinds again and again, or somehow sour cream is ending up on everything that you eat. So that's progression. And then withdrawal. Oh, there is a withdrawal syndrome. It's not well documented for all foods. I just got a great brand new study on salt withdrawal. Very, very helpful. So it's you stop using it, flip it. I'm eating not because I'm hungry. That's withdrawal. I'm eating because I have a headache, I have a stomach ache, I'm angry, I'm depressed, I'm tired. So that's not food use. That's drug use.
Wow. So if you have all 10, do you have to have one or like
Okay, that's a really good question. This is what's just stunned me while I was writing the textbook. There's a full chapter, if I could hold this up again, there's a full chapter in this book on each one of those 11 signs. So I answered the question is, what's the evidence? What do the studies show? Do overeaters, are they experiencing this? And the answer is yes, 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 11 times. And writing these chapters, I write the first one is that, yeah, everybody's got unintended use. Yeah, everybody's got failure to cut back. Yeah, everybody's got time spent. Oh, yeah, everybody's got cravings. And then I wrote the next two chapters and I finished chapter 6. And I stopped. 6 signs is the threshold. It's the cutoff for a severe addiction. And that's when I'd been working on this for 18 years and unsuccessfully. I had tried like 14 major different approaches to getting people to stop. I handouts and an entire popular book and TV appearances and individual coaching, and that people couldn't stop. And in that moment, I knew why. It's because a deeply seated addiction with intense cravings, you've got to protect that person. You've got to protect them from triggers. And that's for that level of addiction, people would normally would go to residential treatment for a year or two. And I thought, well, we're not sending hundreds of millions of people to residential treatment, but you can create residential treatment, that equivalent, in your home by putting in your earbuds, by opening up your screen. We get Zoom all over the world on every device, anywhere you're connected to the internet. If you're not connected to the internet, you can download a daily podcast and listen to that, so that the cueing, the triggering, the messaging, the stimulation is, I have control. I am powerful in this situation. I don't let anybody else use my brain. I have skills. I'm highly capable. And you can fight off the food industry. This is not you. This is the food industry neurologist manipulating your brain. And you get into a safe community where you are protected. You have surround messaging. You can get different stimulation into your head like that. Then you can succeed easily.
Well, Dr. Ifland, thank you so much. I think this has been an encyclopedia of addiction. It's like the thing I was like most fascinated about was fat addiction. I was like, great, that was me. But I hope that many of you got a lot of value from Dr. Ifland. If you want to contact her support group, I'm going to leave a link down in the description if you need support and help with addiction. But thank you again, Dr. Ifland. And I'm sure that we're going to see you very soon. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Dr. Joan Ifland. You can watch this video next with Dr. Bright about a high-fat carnivore diet. And if you're new to carnivore and you need the ultimate beginner guide, check out this video with Dr. Ken Berry. I'll see you guys next week.